Hello everyone, my name is Marco Demutis and this is Screenwalks. Screenwalks is a collaborative program initiated by the Photographers Gallery in London and Fotomuseum Winterthur in Switzerland with support by Pro Helvetia. This series of fortnightly live stream events was created as a joint effort by both institutions to continue the investigation on the changing role of photography in its digital and networked forms. Every screenwalk is led by an artist, a curator, or a researcher performing guided explorations of the places where their core practice takes place. Invited participants take the audience through different online spaces and networked images, from image platforms to alternative ways of seeing, from algorithms regulating the circulation of images to the materiality and infrastructure of digital and network visual cultures. Every screenwalk explores different aspects of the contemporary digital image world. No screenwalk is the same, allowing contributors to create specific online performances, collaborative experiments, live guided tours, and performative lectures. Artists, researchers, and curators are invited and encouraged to play with the properties and possibilities of the live stream, as well as the possibilities of screen sharing. If this is your first screenwalk, please make sure to visit our website, screenwalks.com, to check the recordings of all our previous events. For those of you in Zoom, your microphone should be muted. If not, please go ahead and mute it now. This event is being recorded and will be archived, so please turn off your camera if you do not want to be recorded. Feel free to send questions to me, Fotomuseum Winterthur, or John, the Photographers Gallery, privately or in the public chat in Zoom, and we'll bring your questions to our guests.
Hello from my side too. I'm John Uriarte, curator of the digital programs at the Photographers Gallery here in London. Today we will deep dive into the blurry boundaries between the visible and the invisible with a master of glitch, compression and resolution studies, Rosa Menkman, who, drawing from Whiteout, a project premiered at Transmediale in 2019 and published as an essay on the 33rd issue of Photo Researcher magazine, Menkman will take us on a journey into the laws of visual perception. Combining her artistic practice with theoretical research, Menkman has been thoroughly dissecting the processes of image creation, analyzing notions of glitch, encoding, rendering, feedback artifacts, and the relations between signal and noise. The artist reveals the politics and poetics behind the technical processes, bringing to the front the otherwise hidden structure of the image codes. In 2011, Menkman wrote Glitch Momentum, a little book on the exploitation and popularization of glitch artifacts. She created the Incompatible Aesthetics Symposium at Transmediale in 2012, and in 2015, she initiated the Institutions for Resolution Disputes, the IRD, institutions dedicated to researching the interest of anti-utopic, lost and unseen, or simply too good to be implemented resolutions. In follow-up exhibitions, Behind White Shadows in 2017, Shadow Knowledge in 2020, on Impossible Images in 2021, Menkman developed and highlighted the politics of resolution, setting further, which is resoluted in a second book titled Beyond Resolution. 2019, Menkman won the Collide Arts Center Barcelona Award, which came with a 3-month residency that inspired her recent research and 2 nights screenwalk. Dear Rosa, I think that's all what I have to say. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and also thank you everyone for being here. I made a very complicated thing that is somewhere in between a performance and a lecture. Fortunately, it's not entirely new, as I was already told. It's kind of like from a PDF that then became an opening performance at the Transmediale, but I kind of changed a whole lot for tonight, and it's a little bit stressful. Not for one, because I am a nervous person, but also because actually my computer is a little older these days, 6 years old. So let's see how the computer loves me performing. What I am going to do is I am going to turn off my own video just to get into a better agreement with my computer, like this. I'm also gonna share with you the URL of the first chapter and the chapter where we will come back to somehow. And I'm gonna open it now also. And during the performative talk, there will be some other URLs that I will try also to remember to share, but we'll see how that goes. So here we go into point no point light. It's gray. Snow in the form of fine dust is coming down. It's not the ideal weather to hike up a mountain.
Sorry, Rosa. I think that the...
Oh, yeah. Share your screen. Thanks. That's always very important. I will do that now. And we will start right over. Funny. Yes, here we are. Share. And then we do really a real hard start. There we go. Cool. Thank you for letting me know in time. Okay. Here we are. It's gray. Snow in the form of fine dust is coming down. It's not the ideal weather to hike up a mountain, but we're doing just that. Soon, the path gives way. Covered by a thick, fresh pack of snow, the path has become invisible. So I'll have to use GPS for navigation. I realized I need to do something. I'm very sorry being so crazy. I'm going to change the browser. There we are. This is much better. I'm not alone. A few diamonds are following me. It's very hard because people are coming into my into the performance, but Zoom takes over. So sometimes my browser gets stuck. Maybe could you take the host privileges from me so that I'm not getting the pop-ups for letting people in? That would be very helpful. Thank you. Soon, the trees give way. The path, covered by a thick, fresh pack of snow, has become invisible. So I'll have to use GPS for navigation. My feet are getting a little cold. It's only just the beginning of this walk. But I want to go. Because I do have a mission. Actually, I have multiple missions. One of these missions would be a wish for me to finally see the antenna on top of this mountain. But also, I would really love, this is really a wish I have for a long time, to see the broken spectre. The broken spectre is a special type of fogbow. And in my imaginary museum of variations of the rainbow, it would take a center stage. I think together with, for instance, the circumzenithal arc, and also extraterrestrial rainbows. But while walking here, I think I don't have a chance. The weather is really bad, and although for a fog bow you need fog, there's no light to break. Our mission is to go to the top of this mountain, which, like many other mountains, is marked by an antenna, which is a type of radio transmitter that we would like to document. This is why, besides GPS, we also carry a small handheld device called Limania. The Limania picks up the electromagnetic radiation from its surroundings and translates these frequencies into the domains of humanly inaudible sounds. It kind of serves like an interface. Distilling the intangible and imperceptible infrastructures that are beaming around us, but also straight through us. As we move along the trail, the atmosphere becomes denser and the wind picks up, blurring our sense of spatial perception. A visual gradient fills my viewing plane, changing its values from gray whites to white grays. The wind is roaring in my ears, and the snow is constantly holding me down. Limania has become the only proof of life outside of this gray space. It's become comforting to listen to its sounds in my ears while it pings the invisible infrastructures, assigning parameters to spaces my eyes can no longer see. Two years ago, I won the Collide at CERN residency, which gave me the opportunity to travel to CERN and to speak to quite a few particle physicists. I asked them about hypothetical impossible images. I asked them, imagine you could obtain an impossible image of any object or phenomenon that you think is important, with no limits on spatial, temporal, energy, signal to noise, or cost resolutions. What image would you create? The answers I received were amazing, and I now have a collection of impossible images that offer me an insight into the limits of our different imaging technologies. But it also offered me kind of a preliminary categorization of impossible, where seeing beyond the wavelengths of light or at the absolute smallest increment of time, could produce incredible perspectives, capturing both all and nothing at the same time. But it also sparked a thought of the impossible through time. How ways of seeing that are not just technically impossible, but beyond our imagination, can become commonplace. Or on the other end, how possible images can become inaccessible, broken, or out of range. What is possible and what is impossible then seem to me to be connected as much in time as to imagination, speculation, or belief. One scientist told me he wished to have antennas in his eye sockets to see through the walls and straight into the electromagnetic spectrum. With 20/20 electromagnetic vision, his sight would entail everything from electricity to cosmic rays, including the colors I am currently blind to. With antennas as eyeballs, I would clearly distinguish the antenna on top of this mountain. The beacon would actually be relentlessly screaming at me in signals stretching beyond the infrared. But I see nothing. As I scale the mountain, I wonder if there could be creatures out here that in the fog can perceive the noise of the antenna. How much of this landscape hidden in the layers of snow and fog exists to organisms and networks that have passive electronic properties? Are my human qualities simply inadequate to understand the violence of these intangible signals? Thoughts like these float and sink on the rhythm of the beating wind, as the path seems to be twisting, crossing, intersecting and connecting, bending and elongating. I have lost my sense of light. And as my air stares into the grayish whites, it seems like all could be dark. White in the dark, or white without light? Some years ago, I found myself inhabiting a little cabin in the desert. I had rented an SUV, or at least a car that I thought was an SUV because it was shaped and it was said to be an SUV, but in the end, it lacked high suspension or the horsepower that I need to drive through the desert. Either way, I was excited about the endless vastness of the desert. I drove for days without a route, quickly going, following the dust devils into the unforeseen. On one such drives, I found myself on a dust road, quickly getting narrower. When suddenly there was really not a place to turn anymore. Trapped into always moving forward, I noticed that the road changed from dust to sharp rocks. Trapped in always moving forward, I spent hours on that path. And I remembered extreme relief when suddenly the path changed into a real street. Looking out over an interstate stretching into the horizon that cut a valley in two, in the distance, I saw a strange light peeking over the rims of a mountain. A strange daylight lantern shining with immense intensity. "45 minutes later, I pulled up at a concentrated solar farm. I swung my door open, expecting to hear some kind of buzz from the power that incredible white light must harness. But it was quiet. It was endlessly quiet. I closed my eyes. And suddenly all that was left was the quiet of that space that enclosed me. It might as well have been Venta Black. I pull myself back on the mountain. Here it's still very cold. And definitely it's not that type of white. The weather is actually escalating. It's no longer just gentle snowfall, it's a storm. And the reflections of the flakes pixelate my sense of horizon. A line that could have been a guiding beacon. A particular capacity of the line is to create a surface, Kandinsky once wrote. But this trail presents no line. It's a place of distortions without surface, resolutions, or progress without any depth. In the dictionary of the English language, an old one actually, in fact, it's described, the line is described with 17 different definitions, amongst which the longitudinal extension, a string, a contour, and a family line. But I don't see these lines here either. Maybe if I run some lines, maybe that could give me a lead. A border, a boundary, a frontier, a limit, an outline, a separator, a perspective, a line of flight or a guideline, a progress bar, a ruler, a red thread, a storyline, a chronology, a timeline, a vector, a ray of light, a beam, a sequence, an axis, a connector, or a link. I have none of these. Lines offer not just a direction, but also a shape, a rastrum, a grid, a wave, a maze, a mesh, a labyrinth. It seems this snow is just infinite, and I see none of these possibilities. Everything just remains unresolved. I think actually Matthew Fuller would laugh at me. But in this problem, I cannot even see the threads that could make a knot. Everything is just unraveling. A terrible feeling of dread and loneliness come over me. This space doesn't allow me to make space, to plot or situate myself. Full of invisible rules and viscosities, it keeps me from inhabiting it. Blurred is this blizzard. A blizzard of thoughts that doesn't offer me any clear lines of definition. Shadows and shapes appear from the corners of my eyes, but they disappear when I try to see them. Okay. At CERN, another scientist spoke to me about the fact that humans can only remember one direction of time, the direction that accounts for the past. He speculated about the possibility of a fourth-dimensional object that could help him remember a future. With access to that object, he could carve slices of time, including the future, which could make him navigate the present. Shadows and shapes appear in the corner of my eyes. Apparitions that lead to nowhere. When I try to see them, they just disappear. The ghosts are dancing in a fog of flake, and my hair is dancing with them, reaching out like tentacles in front of my eyes. The trills of white noise make space for a flurry of references, images that take up the space beyond my retina. These projections on my brain. What could be happening? Is this maybe what Tito Stylo calls apophenia? If you are sensitive, sorry, I should have said this earlier. If you're sensitive to strobes, oh, what has changed? Something weird is happening here. This is not where we're going. Midtown, you. Then please turn your eyes off for a second. Here we go. Suddenly, there's a little clearing in the sky. I can see a shimmer of light. The sun has given me back a sense of perspective, which is a vertical perspective. The final stretch of the track is suddenly there, and it is not long before we reach the end of the trail and arrive at the summit of the mountain. But our video and photographic equipment is depleted. And the base of the antenna is visible, but the rest is shrouded in gray. There it stands, repeating inaudible messages, encrypting on different frequencies. But I can still clearly hear them with my Limania. Obfuscated in the snow and fog, it stands there like a mountain to gray media. I just opened this impossible garden, and you're welcome to either join there. I was trying to send a link while I was talking, while I was browsing, but that didn't really work out. That actually concludes the performance, by the way. So I'm gonna close some things here, which was really interesting because that was I closed Impossible Garden. It's always so different when you try to perform something versus when you do it alone. Right, here I am. And now someone can talk.
Thank you
and
so
doesn't
much.
need to be me.
Sorry. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And yeah, sorry for the little problems at the beginning. Actually, what we did, we locked the meeting for the duration. So now we're going to open it again to let people come in who went to see the performance on Twitch on the live stream, because in case they couldn't join. So yeah, thanks a lot. I want to encourage everybody to start asking their question through the chat. I already had somebody who wanted to ask a question, so I think we can go right to it. Sonia was asking about, maybe she wanted to know more about like the work that you did in the desert and in the snowstorm. And the question is if you went out being prepared for the unexpected, even extreme events that you can document for your art. And regarding the residency in the desert, if you did this trip by yourself, or did she or does she always work with a team?
Yeah, so in the desert, actually, I got there because I was working with Sonic X on a project called Dark Ecology. We were above the polar circle in the Nordic Arctic. And I at that point had no home to come back to. I was like doing a lot of festivals, pre-COVID times. It was different life. And I hadn't really planned where to go next. And it was very beautiful that
I think was perfectly in tune with this problem within the.
I don't know what happened.
Your video froze. The audio was going okay, at least for me. I don't know, John.
Yeah, no, it was breaking for me too. I was just thinking that it's the perfect skinwalk to have this kind of glitches with Rosa. In fact, it's the first one we have like we have had this audio video problem, but it's quite nice. I think that it was pretty good with your work. Can you talk now to check if like we can hear you properly?
I think I can talk, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Much better now.
Good. Where did I cut off?
To be honest, it was at the beginning of the question. I'm not if we've lost her even now.
Rosa?
I think that, yeah, I think that we've lost, that her computer might have crashed.
Yeah, she did mention that she put a lot of stress on the computer power, and that might be one of the consequences.
Yeah, I was thinking also that meanwhile, maybe we can share the, I don't know if everyone has had the chance to visit hold on, she's coming again. The impossible image common garden I was suggesting, but if Rosa can you hear us?
This is still part of the performance.
It is.
The big plot twist of this screen walk.
Okay, so what I was gonna suggest was to maybe explore the impossible garden that Rosa has created for us, and if you want to like meet with us there. Meanwhile, while Rosa joins us, I think that she is there.
Yeah,
yeah.
She can't be unmute. Wait just a second.
Yeah.
The Menkman has to.
Yeah, there she is.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
I just changed devices because I think the computer wants to kill me after everything, which is fine. So I'm now on the phone, which is possibly better. What I was still in the process of answering Sonia's question. And I don't know where I cut it off, but I will just pick it up where I think I cut off. So I was working with Sonic X on a big project in the polar circle, the polar region, and I knew I was not, I wasn't sure where I was gonna land next. And one of my colleagues said, "Hey, I heard you have no place to stay. You could just go after this to my home in the desert." And so what I was, in this case, I was very ill prepared, but I did, I had a connection who knew the place where I was going to be. So that made it much easier. When it came, there is a part that is in the Arctic region, but it's the South Pole. It was with the army, the Chilean army. This was something you could not be prepared for. I mean, I had all the equipment, but it was a lot of surprises. And then when it came to CERN and the Brocken, these are like, CERN is obviously really well organized, and as an artist, they have a really good framework for the residency to help you out and connect to the scientists. And of course, I did a lot of research into physics, so I tried to read up, I tried to learn better what to ask the scientists, etc. But yeah, there's always things that you cannot prepare for. I do work a lot by myself. The Brocken and the trip to the Arctic was done in collaboration. I hope that answers Sonja's question. Took a long time. Try my best.
She also had a follow-up question that I guess you also talked about your interest in doing work at CERN, and what was particularly attractive about CERN for your interest. And I think it's also something that I am also personally interested in knowing about, because I mean, I know they have this great program and we see this output, this residency, but how it is to work with scientists, also on these specific questions, which I think the role of the scientists within this image technology and these ideas of seeing and imaging is particularly important, and usually in artistic practices are not so commonly included.
What's really my reason for writing to CERN was a longer research into resolutions. And so resolutions don't need to be in image processing, but I use the realm of image processing as a kind of a starting point to do this research. What I'm specifically interested in when it comes to resolutions is not just how they make things work, but also how they compromise other stuff. And that, of course, often goes through inherent biases of our image processing technologies, but not all those biases we are aware of, or all those compromises. We are not always kind of able to look behind the image and see how it was constructed and what other ways of construction have been compromised within that construction. So I came to CERN with the question of what I called shadow knowledge, like where is the knowledge that lies in the shadows? But what I realized is that the scientists at CERN, they really enjoy talking to artists. But when you come as an artist with a metaphoric question like, hey, are there shadows in your work, in your field of research? They have a hard time picking up on that artist language and to push it further. So what I needed to do, and what was really great at CERN, is that you have scientific advisors, and we rewrote this question, and that's the question about impossible images. So I had to really restart the research there at kind of like the first week of my residency there. So it was quite a long question you asked. Does that cover some of the parts? Like, I feel like there was like 3 parts, but I just answered 2 maybe.
No, I think you definitely ask your attraction to CERN and this idea of working with scientists. Maybe just, I guess part of my question was also like, the relationship or in this collaboration within an artistic context. But yeah, maybe like the larger questions behind it, again, from my personal perspective, and then again, I invite everybody to bring your questions here on Twitch. But in the meantime, I'll take advantage of the time to ask my own question. Because especially like in your practice, you have this very, very strong combination between a very strong theoretical research and an artistic practice that they come together. And you also seem to do this very thorough online publication, printed publication that looks so methodical, and like you cover like so much. So I just wonder, like, they are already quite scientific in itself, and like how did these scientists differ in that sense, or what did they bring specifically from their perspective, from the way that you work? Because you already have, I mean, of course, not a quantum physics perspective, or the perspective of the physicists of CERN, but was there something that was, you know, like a particular added value in your project? Was that clear?
I think it's a really interesting question. So what I already kind of tried to go for is what is really lacking or missing is a bridge between the different languages, the language of science and the language of art. And that also means that sometimes particular concepts are hard to translate or hard to dig into. So when I was looking for compromise, what I really started to think is like, okay, I have now a collection of impossible images. That means that the space of compromise, I can also kind of give that a vague shape by kind of mapping out the cuts that are put by a compromise by choosing a particular way of resolving. But what I really would like, and I think would be very helpful, maybe not so much for scientists per se, but more for people from the humanities, is like to have a tool to kind of abstract the image processing technology and to understand better at what steps of the creation of the image compromise can slip in. And then once we understand that kind of process and like the steps at which compromise can slip in, if we have a tool for that, we can much easier kind of map the space of compromise, and so map the space of bias, right? So I started to kind of compare all the different types of image processing technologies that the scientists used at CERN. And some of them would describe their huge machine, which could be like a huge magnet that would look at the sun and look for axioms. Axioms are not photons, but they are tiny particles as well. So they respond to the big magnet. So the magnet is kind of like the lens. So it's not like in normal optics, like a lens, a glass lens that like makes the photons arrive at a particular sensitive object proper. It's another way of sensing particular particles, axioms they're called. And what's interesting about that is that actually what you see, there are like things that come through the image processing technology. Then there is that image processing technology, and then particular settings make the image. And so what I started to see is like, look, it might be that you are listening or you're watching photons, but you might be watching electrons or gravitational radiation or cosmic rays, whatever. There is a whole group of things that you can listen or see or sense, right? And they're going through these machines and they have particular settings that are cutting particular things out. So I started to try to create a tool for mapping compromise. And what I was missing was the language. And what I really learned and what I really got from that scientific experience is something very simple, actually. It's the words messenger and window. So you have a particular messenger, and it can be anything from an electron to a gravitational radiation. And it goes through a window. And those two things on a very abstracted level are very important places to look for already compromise. And of course, then we have like the model of Shannon and Weaver, which is very old, 1948 mathematical theory. But we can start to kind of like make these little steps more complex and then start to kind of map where the field of compromise really exists, how it sits into that formula that I'm trying to kind of develop. And so what I think, like my publications online, especially the last one, Beyond Resolution, is a practice-based publication. It has a lot of the artworks that I made, and so it's not necessarily like the hard scientific language. It's very, I would say there's a lot of poetics there. But what I got out of being in the scientific field is really to build a bridge between that like practice-based work and understanding what words to use to gain more knowledge, but also to kind of like poke at it from a different conceptual way. Is that followable? I wish I had some slides, but my computer completely went on a holiday just a few hours before me.
Yeah, I just seen yeah, you have like a fun comment on the chat. Says that someone loves your brain.
Thanks.
Especially the way you make available the potential of this digital sensorium. I was wondering if you could expand also on how this research that you did on CERN can be reflected on the show that you created about impossible images recently. Because we talked maybe about publications online, but not so much about like working as a curator. And yeah, if you could like explain us a little bit about that.
About the
connection.
show? Or...
About the exhibition. Yeah, the exhibition that...
Yeah, so there was like a little piece in the weird performative talk I did. It was about impossible images, and there was like a preliminary categorization of impossible. So that was all kind of set within a space, a virtual space, which I call the blob. The blob is a binary large object. It's like an acronym. The binary large object, which is this moiré kind of sculpture, has actually also an exhibition inside of it of impossible images, and that opened during COVID. It's just an online exhibition. But what was really beautiful is that in July, Loodginger Draait Zien, which is an artist, a gallery kind of space out of Munich, run by two fantastic people, Lisa and Lucy. I was invited by Lucy to actually translate that exhibition from the blob, from the virtual space, into a real gallery. And then, yeah, I mean, I created the blob and I really tried to kind of make a space that showed the cuts and showed the compromise in a way. The question became, how do you translate such a virtual space to a real space? Normally you do the opposite, right? You do a real space to a virtual space. But in a virtual space, you have so many other and kind of like more possibilities than in the real space. So yeah, it was kind of like a struggle, but it was also really beautiful. I got to kind of abstract 5 of my favorite categories of impossible. So one of them is time-based, or I call it chronology-based impossibilities. Another one is the axis of belief or trust. Another one is lo-fi technology. So technology, like things are possible or impossible due to technology. A fourth one was machine learning. Machine learning is like a way that impossibilities and bias and compromise are slipping into the process of making images from all kinds of new, how do you say, like, all kinds of new angles. Like actually this this formula of compromise that I've been trying to explain, it's much more complex due to the introduction of machine learning algorithms in the image processing process. And then a fifth axis was the axis of all possible images. And while it is the axis of all possible images, it actually it just shows that there's always problems. There's always kind of impossibilities in if you go to the edge of the limit of the, you know. So in this axis, one work was by Fabian Heller, and it was the number of every image his display could show, and that means it was an HD monitor, so it was 1920 times 1080 pixels. So that's like kind of if you just had a binary resolution, but of course he has like 24K colors. So then you have to put it to the power of 24. What comes out of that quite complex calculation is a number that there's no word for it in human language or machine language. And if you calculate it, what your calculator normally does, it just gives you some abstract number, like a number that's not written out fully. So it's also not visible in a sense. That number stands for the number 0 to that number, and every number in between is one possible rendering that his display could show. But if you would play all those images on your display, you would have to have 18 human lifetimes, because you can't see that many images in one lifetime. And if you bring the number to print, which is an incredibly large number, then the printers don't have a way to print it because it's bigger than a paper. And so we ran into all these problems of everything possible. And that's a real problem because when you go to very state-of-the-art laboratories where they have the newest types of microscopes, for instance, they can try to, you know, make an image of the full field of view for that microscope, but they have no computer power to process all that information. So even there, they always have to cut and use a lens. And so they cut, they invoke a compromise, right? So yeah, what I was trying to say is like in this physical translation in the Lothringer this year, I kind of took out 5 of my favorite categories of impossibility, but I am sure there are more categories, and I mean, I'm still collecting them. And so what we got from CERN and the residency there for me, I just learned the field of expanded photography, but also the limits of the field of expanded photography have become so complex, and there's still a lot of stuff there to research and to kind of theorize. Is that a good answer?
I think that, you know, we could cover like 1,000 screen walks to go in the depth of all of these issues that you've explored over the years. But maybe, you know, also following up on this idea of approximation, compromise. So this kind of like idea that very poetically also comes out also the performance and in your works, this idea that vision and imaging system eventually are kind of compromises, right? Does that, and also I think you were mentioning this concept of apophenia, right? This making correlations. So does that, how do you feel about that person? Like, is it liberating? Is it frightening? There's this instability about the world as a whole perception that is always and forever a compromise. But yeah, I don't know, just like how do you see it?
And I think being a human, you need to be aware that you're always compromising things. Like even any sense of perception is just like a little piece of everything that is out there. And like also when you go to like CERN, one thing that is very obvious is like they still haven't like fully defined the basic theories about, or they're still looking to fill in the theory about how the Big Bang happened, how we came to be in this universe. There are still massive problems, and our problems is like it's nice that we don't know everything, and it's also like we're human, we can't know everything. So just to say, like, being a human already invokes like having a human lens on the world. What I think is really important, like, and that was also one of the chapters in the walk, is that, like, for instance, humans, we're using a lot of the electromagnetic frequency spectrum, right? The whole day. On our phones, we send out GPS, we send out Bluetooth, we use Wi-Fi, we can listen to the radio. Those are all frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum, the electromagnetic frequency spectrum. A little tiny part of that is our visible part, like the things that we can see. There's a part that we can hear through devices, but then there's a huge part that we are totally in, we're not able to listen through our human wetsuit. We can't see it, only if we would put an antenna in our eyes, we would transcode that part. We can't really hear it, only when we use a device to transcode, like Limenia. Okay, but are there then other creatures, maybe trees, maybe mycelium networks, maybe fish, that are actually aware, that can actually listen or sense beyond what we humans can sense? And are we pushing a lot of the noise that we're making for our devices, for whatever, into their realm of perception? Are we maybe the most noisiest creatures in this world? Okay. For our sake, I think it's nice that we know that we have limits, and that we are not seeing all that electromagnetic radiation we're making. But it also, like, gives it makes it us in knowledge, like what you can't see, what you can't hear, makes you kind of like, you're kind of like able to ignore really easily. And so we're kind of ignorant of all that. And so it's a double-edged sword. It works for us. We are limited creatures, and we make a huge mess around us, right? So your question was, are there biases, are there lenses, are there blind spots in spaces like CERN? I think that was the question. I think there are actually, on every step of looking, seeing, feeling, there are always limits, there are always biases, and there are always things we know but we ignore, or things we don't know we ignore. And so what we just need to learn is to be more aware that those biases, those compromises, those invisible spots are always there. And we have to try to train ourselves in considering them more often, maybe.
Thank you. This was a very beautiful answer. And in the meantime, I had another question coming from the chat, again from Sonia, about what might be done to achieve greater collaboration and closer/clearer communication between science and art beyond your specific own work and more in general.
Yeah, I think that's an important question, but for me, it's always about language. And so, like, I was really trying to do that, right? Like, try to find words and language to kind of connect these frameworks. But I think there is a lot missing in the standard education of children, in university, to actually make space to bridge these gaps between different discourses. And so I personally have some books of when I was young, in which I can see what we were being taught when I was in high school, which is the last school that I took physics in. And it has a little page about the electromagnetic spectrum, the electromagnetic frequency spectrum. That's it. It's not enough, because I think these are ways to really understand the basics of what it means to be human. And we all need to train ourselves to get more fluid into the spaces beyond just our eyes and our ears. And we need to understand where these spaces, like where they resonate, right? So I think it comes down to like training from a young age that bias is part of being human, but that you're responsible of knowing what your bias, or knowing that there is bias, and then actively learning to investigate those biases.
And I think also you mentioned before this approach of the physicist or the scientist to look actively for mistakes, for errors, for these biases. And maybe also my question was about, like, there is also a friction with other models and technologies that are tied to economies, right? So on the other side, we have these systems that are kind of enforced, always trying not to look at the biases, no? If we're talking about machine learning, but also even if we talk at the JPEG compression, right? Like if you look at it from the way that they're promoted by specific industries, it's always like the perfect way to reproduce an image, which is the way of seeing the world that is implied to be objective and unproblematic. Whereas from the scientific part, there's much more like this approach of looking for all of these things that you said and the problems. That's always like a friction that is very interesting. And that's also maybe, I think, something that is difficult to negotiate. This part is having a completely different agenda, different interest, and different approach toward this. But I don't know if you want to go into that. It was just something that came up, and now
I think what you're advocating is like including a sense of media archaeology inside, like that is what you're really saying. Like a lot of the standards that we're using are based on particular compromises, particular biases. You mentioned JPEG, which is based on a Caucasian model. I put you the MP3, which is based on Susana Vega's voice. There's a plethora of, like, every standard has its problems. And so what is very important is that we just learn what media archaeology is, and that's not been taught at all yet. But now that media are taking over our everyday busyness, I think we need to realize that there's a history inside technologies that we use. And so maybe we need to expand our history classes, you know, from a young age.
Definitely. And, you know, I also thought that it would be nice, if you think it's a nice idea, to talk a little bit also about the setup that you had for today's performance, just because also, like, I want to say publicly how much John and I really appreciated all the efforts that you put into doing this kind of specific version of your work. And I know that was so much work that went into it. You know, there's like the Common Garden platform, there's a plugin, there's like the whole live 3D model space.
Yeah, it was a little bit crazy, but I enjoyed it. I don't even know where to start. Like, I was using New Art City, which is this new 3D platform for creating a lot of exhibitions actually at the moment. I think not so much performances, which I think actually what's really interesting is what I was trying to do is use a lot of tools as a performative tool, while they're kind of not necessarily used that way. Like the plugin was used also as a, or there was two plugins actually I built for this. They have some kind of like time-based element, right? So New Art City, the room that I shared also in the chat, it has this really narrow, tiny kind of space that you have to navigate, but you lose track really easily because there's so much fog. And yeah, then it has these like little places where you can navigate to that have their own stories. I used Google Earth. I know it's shit, but I also don't know what else to use to enter the spaces that we cannot enter anymore. And then some video and some audio. Really what I was trying to kind of get to is like this weird, how do you say, like a tension between doing or having like a very empty space with just a lot of fog, but also kind of like a lot of storyline and a lot of well, processes in a way, which is not maybe the most interesting thing to do. But so there was this tension between oversaturation and under overwhelmingness of the space, which why I brought this performance back, because I did the one only maybe 1 month before Corona hit the world in a way. Before Corona, I was really very busy. If I look back at my timeline, it's incredibly painful actually to watch how everything just took a standstill, and then you are like sitting on your computer and you have this total feeling of being overwhelmed by not being able to do anything. And so what I realized is like, while I made whiteout for describing this experience of a snowstorm, actually I feel like it's very much how I felt for the last year and a half. Very overwhelmed, very tired. Things don't work. There's a lot of friction in a space of nothing. So that's why I tried to see if there's actually a space to translate that performance to an online space, which is where we now are all kind of stuck in, right? So, and we're jumping from one shitty platform to the next, and they don't really fit inside each other, but they can be connected and bridged, and the bridges are like leaking and they're kind of collapsing. And yeah, that's like now the way we have to communicate, which is super painful.
Yeah. I think it was a great reflection on also like jumping from corporate platforms to more alternative and like artistic approaches of like internet spaces, and also this feeling of getting lost among so many layers, windows, tabs, platforms, or even Zoom calls as this one. Yeah, I mean, let's hope that the new year will be better for all of us, and all these feelings and experiences might change and improve a little bit for all of us. Yeah, I think that we've been like over an hour now on the skin walk. I think that if there's no last question, maybe we are ready to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much, especially Rosa, for all the work that you have put into the performance and the great replies that you have given to our questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry it broke down, but it was kind of part of it, right? Like we were kind of like, it was kind of expected. It just wasn't expected that, yeah, anyway. But I'm very happy that we got to do it, and I'm thankful for everyone that came. And stay safe in the online world.
Thank you also from my side. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. And I just want to remind you that as much as I hope, like John said, that the situation will be better, we will still be back in Zoom every 2 weeks with Screenwalk starting from the end of January. So you'll hear again from us with the next lineup for 2022 soon.